So Reddit, symbol RDDT on the New York Stock Exchange, owns and operates the website Reddit, of course, an online network of unique communities that allow users to dive into experiences built around their interests, hobbies, and passions. And their revenue model is really advertising at this time. So the company IPO'd in March of 2024 at $34 a share, but that quickly jumped after the opening. So if you never bought in before the IPO, you wouldn't have been able to get it at that $34 in reality. The shares are now at $55.30 a share, up 9% since its close on the first day, or 63% since that IPO price, resulting in a market cap of just over $9 billion. That first day jump isn't exactly uncommon for IPOs, but Reddit did better than average. I looked up a couple of numbers, and it would range anywhere between low double digits to mid-teens in that range for initial IPO day of, from their listed IPO price to the first day's close. So obviously, when you're going up 60% in it the first day, that's great. And surprisingly, they actually did beforehand open it up to more retail investors that were using their website. So some people outside of the investment banks actually benefited from that initial influx, which is nice to see. But the company recently reported its first quarter, Q1 2024, as a public company. So let's just take a look, see how they are doing. Revenue grew at 48% to $243 million. The majority of revenue, 82.2%, was derived from the US. Ad revenue increased by 39% to $222.7 million, or 91.6% of the total revenue. So as you can see, ad-driven business. When it comes to social media platforms, or really any ad-driven platform, an important non-financial metric that's commonly used is active users. You'll see this in different forms. In Reddit's case, they report daily active uniques and weekly active uniques, which increased 37% to 82.7 million and 40% to 306.2 million, respectively. Other companies, they might report similar metrics, but you always want to look at how they list the criteria. Some won't be unique users, they'll just be users, which would one-to-one that would produce a higher number if you're looking at any users versus a unique user. So you really want to look into how they are doing that. But normally you can look quarter to quarter, year over year within a company, but it's hard to compare between companies for users if you're looking at that. But the company's gross margin is 88.6%, which is expected given that ad-driven nature of revenue. That's something you will see. You'll see 70, 80, even 90% gross margin on any ad-driven company. And that should be something that you should expect. But that being said, it did jump about 5% over the past year, which is also good to see for Reddit. Adjusted EBITDA grew to a positive $10 million from a deficit of $50.2 million, the company's first positive adjusted EBITDA quarter. So previously, even when they were private, they were not adjusted EBITDA positive. GAAP income was a loss of $575 million, however. It's not uncommon for recently IPO to just have a massive GAAP net income loss, given the accounting adjustments as well as share compensation to do with an IPO. And here is just no different than that. Just taking a look at how adjusted EBITDA is calculated, we can quickly see the major difference between net income and adjusted EBITDA is a whopping $595 million in share compensation, which is just exponentially higher than the prior year's $13 million. So you can see this is when an IPO occurs, you'll have things that trigger various share vestitures, and that brings it all forward. And then, of course, the share price may raise, like in Reddit's case, which will increase also share compensation. So you really need to look at, is this just a one-off? Is this just to do with an IPO, or are they going to be a continuous share diluter over share compensation, which we do see occasionally in the software space? So looking at the IPO share compensation, what they state, what was attributable to the IPO triggering those vestitures was $535 million. So a significant amount. There was $60 million of that was directly related to the IPO. But then we can also say the share price increased, that increased the option valuation to put them in the money, and that's also included in there. At the end of the quarter, the company had a remaining 41 million in shares in RSUs and RSAs and options, 25.8 million of that being outstanding options, which are at this point, you only see the weighted average money, but they're likely all in the money given the massive increase in price. Then 15.4 million RSUs and RSAs, which have an average weighted time till vesture of 1.7 years and have a total expected expense of 280 million at this time. So over the next couple of years, you'll start to see those being recognized as they vest, which will also create a drag on their GAAP earnings. from that share compensation. And that's something you really want to watch. As well, what you want to watch from here on out is, are they continuing to issue high amounts of RSUs or options? Because that can sometimes stop once a company actually goes public, or become lower at least to a more reasonable rate. Because obviously you don't want to see $500 million in share compensation every quarter when the revenue's half that. But quickly moving to the balance sheet, it's strong. Given the IPO cash injection, they already had a net cash position before this, but they added additional cash with their IPO and now has $1.67 billion in cash and marketable securities, with no debt and just minor leases. So the cash is very strong. That's about 18.5% of the market cap. So the company is just, especially cash rich, given the size of the company. We normally, once you're seeing those multiple $billion companies, even a cash rich company will only get in a single digit. So nearly 20% is quite substantial for a company the size of Reddit. Valuations, however, not attractive. Like I said, no net income GAAP or non-GAAP even. Adjusted EBITDA was just the last quarter. So we really have to go price to sales, which isn't the greatest metric, but it's a give you an idea of where it can go if you're looking for that profitability in the future. And it's 8.2 times off roughly the forward rate what I could find, and it's of 1.1 billion in revenue for the year, and that's not outlandish given the last quarter. And as Q4 is generally just normally the strongest quarter for an advertising-based company, 240 million times 4, then a bit more with that fourth quarter, as well as growth. 1.1 billion, it seems reasonable, but 8.2 times is still quite high given that it is not a profitable company. Even just touching that profitability of positive adjusted EBITDA, it still has a ways to go to really hit that bottom line. Past advertising, the company does have an additional growth opportunity through leveraging its database of really communities and natural chatting of humans for the use of AI. After the quarter's end, the company partnered with OpenAI, which will bring in additional revenue to the company. But that being said, there is some issues with using Reddit as an AI's data set. Publicly, Google's AI search results have had blunders when using Reddit. For example, the AI result of recommending mixing Elmer glue into pizza sauce for that extra tackiness is just a great decision. And this was due to a over a decade-old Reddit post referring to that as a joke. So you're taking years and years, or even a decade-old data, which these people obviously had no idea AI was going to come into it, and now introducing it to a community that will know that future data is being used for AI and that they are susceptible to abusing that. That could be a potential risk. I'm not saying that is, but that may falter some of the database demand of Reddit, and it may not just really be that cash cow that they're hoping for if it's ultimately not good enough. But maybe some AI want to deal with that. They want to deal with looking through sarcasm, jokes, and just faulty information. So there's a potential use case, even if the data is purposely incorrect or just jokes or sarcasm and so on. But that is ultimately a growth opportunity for Reddit past advertising. But overall, Reddit is just expensive, even on sales, and has material dilution still likely to occur over the next couple of years, even if no more significant share compensation is issued, creating an overhang for the company. The company is dependent on a single, while relatively long-standing product as far as the internet go, is always a risk. If for some reason Reddit disappeared, that's actually, interestingly enough, kind of how Reddit started up. Is the previous go-to internet form where aggregated communities was Dig. They made mistakes. Mind you, this was about 15 years ago or even more than that now. And then people migrated to Reddit. There is a direct, they were the beneficiary of it. They could ultimately blow themselves up in some manner. While I don't think that's going to happen, that is ultimately a risk when you have a single product and a really fickle community more than anything. The company is able to lean a bit on its strong balance sheet while it does trend towards profitability. But overall, given that high sales valuation in the same ballpark as big players in the ad space, such as Alphabet and Meta, it's just hard to justify given this lack of profitability at this time. So for now, I wouldn't invest in Reddit. Maybe in a few years, once the dilution is worked through, that post-IPO dilution, which you see time and time again, and if the company does end up being profitable, does still have a growth track in front of it, maybe it's worth a second look at that time. But for now, I'd give it a pass.
Yeah, I'd agree. Again, it's simple, just doesn't meet the profitability criteria. We're hammering on that today. Yep, it looks like a growth stock on the top line, and maybe if you adjust out some items, there's some adjusted profitability there. But our minimum criteria is good, solid cash flow, and Reddit really isn't there yet, and the valuation is just
Yeah, I'm
high.
glad you brought
Period.
up
Right now.
the Reddit OpenAI like partnership, just because I mean that's hilarious. Adding Elmer Glue, I was laughing pretty hard at that. But you know,
Maybe it can train AI to deal with sarcasm.
well,
Maybe that's going to be this specialty that
well,
comes out of Reddit.
exactly, and like that's the
Who
thing.
knows?
Like, I mean, I was listening to like I think his name's Edward Harris, and there was I think his brother on a podcast recently, and they were just talking about like training AI systems and how trying to basically make them understand context where you well when you're testing them, you'll give them tons and tons and tons and tons of text and just randomly out of in some random paragraph you'll put they use the example as Whopper is the best burger, and then when you ask the AI system you're asking it what's the best burger, and hopefully it can work through basically all the text and find this randomly within the text. And again, it's just training it to like understand context, like you said. When people are making jokes on Reddit, because the amount of crap posts that are on there is ridiculous. I mean, I've been on Reddit as well. I mean, there's a lot of garbage on there. Be like taking
Let's
Twitter.
be honest. Most human beings can't understand half the crap on Reddit, right? So
Yeah.
Good luck
we'll
to
see
AI.
if
But yeah, it's
AI.
going to be interesting
Yeah,
to see.
yeah, yeah.